Hello, and welcome to the show Gold Squadron Gays. It's the podcast where two Star Wars loving gays break down each episode of their favorite Star Wars TV shows while also being gay as hell. I'm your host, Bradley Brower.
I'm your other host, Charles Rogers, and welcome to our Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi. I don't know why me and everyone else keep saying Kenobi. It's fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi. Welcome to our fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi.
We love fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'll fuck him. I'd fuck him.
Anyway, our guest, everyone. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
No, not after that. Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Hope Mullinax. Thank you for having me back on the show.
Welcome back. Hope is a veteran of our High Republic episodes. If you listen to the High Republic episodes that me, Chris from Dark Side Divas, and Hope all do, you have heard Hope before, but this is the first time we have had Hope on an actual main episode, which does mean this is the first time that Hope and Bradley are actually meeting.
He's real, guys. Like, I just thought he was a figment of Charles's imagination, like a super gay Mothman cryptid going through the woods.
Cryptid implies there's something interesting about Bradley or novel about Bradley instead of him just being a fucking twink.
I'm actually an AI that Charles developed to just respond to things that he says, and he just has the sass level. Like, he just changes it based on how his mood is that day. He's like, why not turn it up to 8?
It's true.
Can I put in suggestions and you generate pictures for me?
Yeah, Bradley's absolutely a dial that I turn. Yeah, Hope is joining us from Jaig Eyes and Jedi, being the big one that I know her from. But she also does about a dozen other things. Hope, do you want to go ahead and at the top of the show, tell some people what your credentials are?
Oh, yeah. So I am one of the co-hosts of Jaig Eyes and Jedi. Me and my co-podcaster, Chris, have been doing our show for, 8 or 9 years now. And we really started focusing on animation at first, but we've kind of expanded into all television Star Wars. We have done Clone Wars, every episode of Clone Wars, every episode of Rebels, every episode of Resistance, first season of Mandalorian, and we're currently in The Bad Batch. And we're going to do season 2 of Mandalorian next.
There are 300 episodes of this show.
Yes,
there are 300 episodes of this show.
Wow. We're weekly, except for we've missed 2 weeks in our 8 years of recording because Chris is so good at editing and I suck, and that's why we don't have our other podcast has essentially died because I hate editing. I'm also a staff writer for the Geeky Waffle. I've been on some of their shows too, like their Star Wars show, Space Waffles. I've been on Straight Out of Home Video. Pretty soon, in an upcoming episode, we have a new podcast called Bookmark and Busy. It's a discussion of fan fiction. So it's a fan fiction reader who talks and interviews fan fiction writers. And I also write High Republic fan fiction over on AO3 under the name Chaos Lydia.
It's called Fire and Thread, and we've mentioned it on our High Republic stuff. Additionally, I do believe, Hope, you are the moderator for the Pink Milk After Dark.
Oh yeah, in the chat room. Yeah,
room. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I do it. I am the moderator for the Steam Room. It's casual fun. We have a good time over there. We get steamy. And I love those guys too. So come hang out with us on YouTube Friday nights.
I hope you had posted something on, because you mentioned on Jaig Eyes and Jedi, you had mentioned, we'll get to Kenobi eventually, and then after the finale you had posted something on Twitter that was like, I have a lot of thoughts about Kenobi, invite me on your podcast. And of course, anytime anyone does this is how Andy wound up on the show too. Anytime somebody does this, I make a note of this and I'm like,
I appreciate that, because anybody who knows me knows I am a huge fan. I would even dare say possibly the number one fan of the Grand Inquisitor in all forms. I love him in Rebels. He's one of my favorite characters in Star Wars. I love him in the comics, the books. I love Rupert Friend as the Grand Inquisitor. I love my boy. It was so good. Oh gosh. And yeah, I had so many thoughts. Animation's my favorite medium. It's my favorite way to process Star Wars as well. I am a very firm believer that Star Wars functions best in animation because it can just exist. You don't have to worry about the volume or costumes or makeup. You can have a show like Resistance where you walk in and there's 20 aliens and not have to worry about it, and they can just exist. And I love animation. It's my favorite medium. But I came out of Kenobi going, this might be like me, the animation queen. Like, this might be my favorite live action Star Wars, which is saying a lot because it's giving Rogue One, which is my favorite Star Wars movie, a big run for its money. I need to watch the show again, but Kenobi might possibly be my favorite live action Star Wars.
So we're going to take the Resistance thing and we're going to put it in a little box because we don't want to have a 10-minute segment of me and Bradley going at each other.
I will Resistance, I will say, is not for everyone. But what I love about it is it always swings for the fences. Sometimes it strikes out, but it is always trying to smack a home run. And it's probably some of the most experimental Star Wars.
Did some weird shit in season 2 that I really liked.
It's dark. There's an entire like borderline Holocaust scene in Resistance with like aliens being put in shipping containers to be shipped off to concentration camps. Like, it is dark and it's very underrated.
You think you're watching a kids racing show and then boom, we're shipping the aliens off.
Wow.
I mean, because it's a show about fascism invading during peacetime, and what happens when peacetime breaks down and how it happens and how people are indoctrinated in the case of Tam. Like, it's a very underrated show, but I also understand it's not for everybody. It has a very specific tone that's not for everybody. So I get why people don't like it, but I also think it's probably one of the most underrated pieces of Star Wars.
And one day Bradley and I will fight about it. But until then, if you check out Jaig Eyes and Jedi Resistance full show recap, not the seasonal recap, but the full show recap episode, I'm on that episode talking about Resistance. However, bringing it back to Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I figured the best way to do this is we have a couple of little small topics that I want to put pens in. But I specifically want to ask both of you, Bradley, who's been quiet for a minute, just letting Hope talk, Hope, and then I'll answer these questions myself. We'll just kind of do a variation on what we do in the show. At the beginning of every episode recap, Bradley asks one thing you liked and one thing you didn't. I am going to ask that for the entirety of Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I know Bradley and I both binge watched today, the whole thing from beginning to end. So Bradley, we will start with you. Let's get one thing you love. Hope is raising a finger.
I've actually been wondering this, and you brought it up because I've seen an argument that Kenobi works better as a binge and not as a weekly format. Did you find binging it really helped versus watching it weekly with space in between?
Yeah, absolutely. So today I came across a version of Kenobi. Legally, I can't tell you how I came across this version of Kenobi, and somehow it was shrunk down into a nice compact 3-hour-ish. Theoretically, it's 3 hours and 50-ish minutes, if you just kind of watch it all as one thing. You sit down, you watch it, which honestly, it's kind of like watching Titanic. You just kind of watch a fucking long ass movie, and it was fine.
Thought around about episode 4, I was like, this is kind of replicating the experience of watching Return of the King for me. Like, it's about the same. It's a little shorter. It's 30 minutes, 40 minutes shorter than the extended cut of Return of the King. And I was literally like, this functions pretty well. I will also say it functions really well on a rewatch, especially Reva in episodes 1 and 2. Like, there's a bit in episode 3. There's a bit in episode 3 where she's having the argument with the Inquisitors in the boardroom. And at one point, right before she says she talks to Lord Vader, she reaches down and touches her stomach, which is such a weird gesture randomly in the episode, unless you've watched episode 5 and that's where Anakin stabbed her. Or the whole idea of I was watching episode 1 and she tries to kill Nari. They say, let's bring Nari in for interrogation. She tries to kill him. Is she doing that because she just really wants to kill Jedi, the way the scene first plays? Or is she doing that because she doesn't want him to crack under interrogation or have to be subjected to interrogation, and she's trying to kill him quickly.
Interesting.
You go back and you rewatch it, you pick up on these things. It's like, I wonder. I'm thinking thoughts inside my brain.
Weird. This TV show thought you to think other things than what it shows you face value.
I'm sorry to like pose the question, but that's just something I've been wondering, because I have seen that floating around as a question. Is it better as a weekly or as a binge?
So I also want to point out too, I saw a jank ass article today where somebody was like, because of Solo, like they were gonna make Kenobi into 3 movies, but then they were like, no, we can't make it a trilogy anymore because, well, anyway, not true 100% because that's fucking fake. But Kenobi would not have worked as a film.
Well, it was a secondhand source, so
right.
I don't doubt, because there's a name to it. It's not an unnamed. It's the original screenwriter who was brought in to do the films, and it was Variety that reported on it. So I think he might have thought that Solo's disappointment pumped the brakes on it, and I also do think that may be true. I'm sure other conversations were had about it.
Right.
That I don't think necessarily that it boiled down to Solo failed and thus we nixed the Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right. Because then that would mean they also nixed the Boba Fett movie and I think there was a Yoda movie at one point in like
there was a Boba Fett movie that got eventually turned into the Book of Boba Fett, and
right.
There's also like, you can't underestimate the power of streaming with the pandemic, because that really did shift how people consume media. And I was actually reading a really fascinating take about the new Lightyear movie, where a lot of their target audience, they got because these kids just spent the last few years consuming media on television, that they don't want to go to the theater. They just want to enjoy it in like it's a changing format. Mm-hmm. So like, I prefer Star Wars in a television format in general. I think Star Wars works better in TV because you can have more time with characters and developing stories, and it's not like we must cram everything in 2 hours. But that's definitely a big part of it as well.
Oh yeah, no, I read the same article. I also have issues with these articles because the discussion will generally frame it like around the article. The article just neutrally says, the screenwriter says, I was working on this after Solo, they pumped the brakes. They brought it back. They brought on a new screenwriter to turn it into 6. And I'm really glad that I got to see it in some form, make it eventually. The discussion has been Solo failed and Disney axed the Obi-Wan Kenobi trilogy. And I'm like,
it makes me so mad because it's also just, because originally it was Lord and Miller on it. And
we're talking about, on Solo, to clarify.
On Solo, yeah.
Lord and Miller were on Solo.
And I still want a Lord and Miller Star Wars. Like, I love Lego Movie. I love Into the Spider-Verse. I love the Mitchells versus the Machines. Like, I still want a Lord and Miller Star Wars. Give it to me. And I want it to be animated. I want them to do an animated Star Wars movie.
Yeah, I think that trying to piece together the business decisions of a business based on some secondhand things that some people have said. Like, we still don't know why Colin Trevorrow was axed from episode 9. There's like 4 different explanations for why people have said he was axed from episode 9. We still don't know. We don't know a lot of this information. So when articles like that come out, and I'm like, okay, this is interesting that this is one writer's perspective on what happened, we still don't know the full story of the conversations that they had.
Bob Jepic or whatever his name is, like whoever is in charge, like he flat out said we rushed movies too fast. We went too fast through the sequel trilogy and Solo and Rogue One. He flat out said that that was a problem, and that's gonna happen. Like, so of course Solo is going to be really costly. You fucking filmed the movie twice. They had to film the movie twice because they like gutted it halfway through.
Well, here's the thing too that Lucasfilm has done over the Disney tenure that I have really liked. There's a concept in business, the idea of the pivot. I read a book that was talking about it once, that was talking about the idea of one of the business strategies you can do is every so often you evaluate, and if something isn't working, you pivot. And I think that's something Disney has done really well is being open to doing the pivoting. So they were trying to basically, I have a tinfoil hat theory that someone at Disney, an executive at Disney, not Lucasfilm, but Disney, wanted Star Wars to be another Marvel Cinematic Universe where they were releasing a movie, 2 movies, 3 movies every year. And that's just not how Star Wars works, because every single one of those movies is such a big event. But what did Lucasfilm do? When that wasn't working, they pumped the brakes, they pivoted over to doing the streaming, which has worked out a lot better for them. When they did Clone Wars, the season 7 of the Clone Wars, they pivoted slightly and they said, okay, let's do some more animation. We've had the Bad Batch now and Tales of the Jedi, and then other stuff that I've heard is coming up. And I know Hope has feelings about that pivot, because the other thing about pivot is you can pivot the wrong way.
I have a lot of feelings about that. We're here to talk about Kenobis, but that's a rant for another day.
Go listen to Jaig Eyes and Jedi. They're covering all the good and bad of Bad Batch right now. But that's something that they do, is that they look and they see at what works and they adjust their business strategy and what content they put out accordingly. Like the whole thing of nixing the Obi-Wan Kenobi trilogy. It shouldn't have, we didn't need a trilogy. Not everything has to be a trilogy.
Right.
It does not have to be a trilogy. And you can have one thing and it's good.
And that's why I'm trying to bring it back to Kenobi, because what we were saying originally was, you said, does it work as like this condensed kind of film? And it does, as long as you're not constrained to the 2-hour time code that most movies are, 2 hours to 2 hours and 30 minutes that most movies are in theaters. If this movie had been shortened, this quote movie had been shortened down to 2 hours and 30 minutes or 2 hours and 45 minutes or whatever that is, that's 2 episodes less than what we would have gotten, basically. So if you think about the structure of the show, right, you would have think about the structure of the show. What would have been
the first stuff to go?
Probably Reva's
storyline, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So they honestly probably would have killed her.
Well, no, because the same screenwriter said in another interview, I think, that they were going to kill her off.
Oh, girl, I would have.
That was how the original thing ended. Is she didn't know Anakin was Vader. Obi-Wan tells her Anakin is Vader. And she's like, okay, I'm going to go confront Vader and buy you time. She goes back to Vader and says, I killed Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he kills her. And that was going to be the original ending.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Well, because I remember when they switched screenwriters, because originally they had the guy writing the films and they brought on one screenwriter and then they nixed the scripts. Do you remember this?
I vaguely remember hearing something about that.
And
yeah,
they brought on a third writer. And the reason they brought on a third writer was that they thought that they needed to radically reshape the tone of the show to be more hopeful and less bleak. Because they were looking at the scripts and they were like, this is super bleak and we want this to be more hopeful.
All that to say, what was one thing you liked about this season? And one thing
I'm so sorry for asking the question. I'm sorry.
Oh no! Welcome to Gold Squadron Gaze. We will fucking tangent about anything.
Everybody should know I went to go get some water and I came back. They're like, "Yeah, let's make sure this is an hour, not 4 hours." And the first thing I do is just like, "Here's a 20-minute conversation."
We'll see how long it actually. Look, when we did the Thrawn episode with Claudia from Rube Halps, I was like, let's try to keep this around like an hour 15-ish, hour 30, 2 hours and 40 minutes on the raw recording.
How could you not? It's Blue Husbando. That's my Blue
2 hours and 40 minutes on the raw recording.
That's my Blue Husbando. He deserves that much time.
And I'm telling you, when this stupid Ahsoka show comes out, we're gonna be menaces. Like, I can tell you, it's Rebels 2.0. I know it's happening, and it's gonna be insane.
Should have been animated, but whatever.
I have a lot of feelings about that. I am not. I hate that. I'm not excited about a show about my favorite Star Wars character. I hate that I'm not excited. Anyway, Kenobi.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. Bradley, you cannot escape. Let's do you first. One thing you liked about the overall series and one thing you did not about the overall series.
Ooh, okay. This is a tough one. I think that we said this already, but I feel like this works for the series as a whole. I did not like, or I felt like I didn't get enough time to spend with some of the side characters on the show, i.e., Haja or Roken or Tala. Like some of the best characters in the show, they were in it and they had good moments. I just wanted just a little bit more time with them, especially Tala, because I hate killing a character, but especially when I get introduced to them only a week before, and then like the next week you kill them in front of me. So that's the one thing I didn't
thought for
like.
sure she was going to be an Andor. I thought for sure.
I had
I did
money
too.
on that.
Yeah, I definitely was thinking that. Now I kind of feel that's what we were talking about this too. I kind of felt like now maybe Roken might be shifting over into that space, possibly in some capacity, whether that's animated or non-animated. I don't know. You know what I mean? But in that time of whenever Andor takes place is when he possibly might show up, because it's not. When is Andor taking place? We don't know yet. Like it's like vague sometime before Rogue One.
It's about 3 years later. About 3 years later.
And then there's a time skip between season 1 and season 2 to where it's like 5 years later, right up to the edge. It's going to be bumping up against Rogue One.
So the way it's going to work is that the first season of Andor covers 1 year.
Okay.
And then the next season covers the next 4. So we see the beginning and then we move through the next couple of years, and then Rogue One is kind of the ending. You want to talk about when shows come out being menaces? Literally making a show about one of my glove shittos as one of the co-leads of the show. This is the Mon Mothma appreciation podcast. I think about contingency plan at least once a day. Bradley, you haven't read FactPov, but you will, and you will understand what I mean. Because you do eventually have to read the gay stormtrooper story.
Okay, well, anyway, so that was what I didn't like, with side characters kind of got side charactered, a little too much. But it wasn't terrible. It was fine. I really love anytime you talk about the Inquisitores, because when I was watching Rebels, all the Inquisitor characters, I've loved the Inquisitor characters since the beginning of time, and having more than one in this show was awesome for me, because I remember when they first started talking about the show and we didn't really know what it was going to be about, and I had no idea, and I was like, when we were looking at the cast list, I was like, who the hell are all these people? Like, why do they have so many people in this show? And then once we found out that half of the cast was basically Inquisitors, I was like, oh, I fucking love this. I love any red-bladed person that comes into my life is okay with me. And so the fact that we got 4 fucking Inquisitors in this show, basically,
and 2 of them are girl bosses.
Yes,
2 of them are girl bosses.
I honestly wish we had more
Inquisitors. As far as the Inquisitors in the show, it is a perfectly even split.
Yeah.
2 of them are girl bosses. One of them is an amazing Powhatan man, and the 5th brother is also here.
He just kind of
vanishes. Brother is also here. I will not be sad watching your demise in Rebels from here on out. Not that I was before. Yeah, Bradley, you've just been trying to recapture the magic of Asajj Ventress.
I really have, yeah.
Which you've been trying to recapture have you listened to the audiobook yet for Clone or for Tales of Jedi and Sith? Because they have an Asajj Ventress story.
It's on my list too. I haven't got it either.
They have an Asajj Ventress story read by Nika Futterman.
Oh, really? I love Nika.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there when we get there.
Well, we'll get there. As I'm fond of saying, we will get there when we get there. That's what I tell my boyfriend all the time. We watched through Rebels, and so the original trilogy era, and now we're working our way through Clone Wars gradually. We are on season 4, and he will constantly turn to me and ask me questions. I'd be like, is this and such going to happen? And my answer is always, we will get there when we get there.
Right. No spoilers here.
No spoiler. We will get there when we get there. And then he goes on fucking YouTube and watches videos and spoils things for himself anyway. And I'm like, if you watch a single thing about Kenobi, you are sleeping on the couch.
Hope, what about you? What was one thing you really liked about the series and one thing you didn't like about the series?
I had to think about this because when you guys asked me this question,
and don't say the Grand Inquisitor for a
No,
reason.
no, no,
For
no.
a reason.
Yeah.
We got a pin firmly in that one.
Because there's so much I do like about this series. It really jumped to my favorite Star Wars, and like it did so many firsts. So it was really difficult for me to like pinpoint one. Like just like two honorable mentions would be like this is the first time that I really bought Hayden as Darth Vader. That little smile he gives to Obi-Wan when he's like, I killed Anakin Skywalker. I get chills. I still get chills thinking about that scene. My other honorable mention is Reva's redemption, because it broke this horrible, lazy writing trope that the only way for a bad guy to get redemption is through death. It started with Darth Vader, it continued through Ben Solo, and we've only really started seeing that change in animation with characters like Callus. But that was really a first for live action. So like those are definitely like my two honorable mentions. But I was trying to like pinpoint what exactly was my favorite thing. And I think my favorite thing about this series is the exact reason why Rogue One is my favorite Star Wars movie. And what I love about Rogue One is it's the first time that I really felt like the continuity was singing and really working together. And Rogue One to me is what Trash should have been, which was a celebration of multiple eras in a film. And so like when you watch Rogue One, it has animation characters, it has book characters, it has prequel characters, it has original trilogy characters. Like it just beautifully meshes the entire canon into a movie, and it works and it functions. There's like one clunker scene when they run into the two Cantina guys that I hate, because they had to get on that ship in like 2 minutes to be off Jeddah to be in A New Hope, but like it doesn't work. But like for the most part, like it really works, and I think that's why I love Kenobi so much, because it was such a marrying of the canon. And of course, it's like bridging like the original trilogy to the prequels, of course. But it's also doing so much more than that. Like, it really explains why Leia named her kid Ben. It wasn't just a guy that she was on like traveling with for like 2 hours and then gone. Like, it gives these explanations from the prequels. Even the High Republic, there's High Republic references.
There's High Republic graffiti on the wall, which Bradley now knows about because I won't shut up about.
Yeah, and so it like really bridges this like all forms of Star Wars into one. Like there are like nods to animation with the Inquisitors. There are nods to of course like other characters, and Baru reminded me so much from her story at a certain point of view in a lot of ways. And so like it has these like beautiful like roots in the books. It said Padme writes.
Four out of 6 episodes, 2/3 of the series, she is at least mentioned, if not visually shown on screen.
Yeah, and it just captured this like what I feel like Star Wars it shouldn't always do, because it doesn't always work and it's not always the place, but it really sang as this like marriage to the entire canon that doesn't always work in other medias, and I think it did that really well. And I do think that's my favorite thing about Kenobi, and why I loved it so much. Even video games, like the entire Fortress Inquisitorius is Fallen Order, and it just really just touched and lovingly kissed like multiple parts of the canon and gave them love and acknowledgement, which is exactly why I love Rogue One so much.
I am going to say as well, because I'm just going to say this now. This was going to be my thing that I liked, but I'm going to have to go to a different one. But you've just set it up so beautifully. I like the idea that you can tell a story in a pre-existing canon about pre-existing characters that inserts itself seamlessly, that still has stakes and still has its own ethos and still has its own story. I think that part of the reason the opening sequence of the Bad Batch still kind of rubs me the wrong way is there were ways to tell that story without overwriting anything else that came before. And what Obi-Wan Kenobi does really well is it's respectful of the material that came before it, but still manages to tell an incredible story about an emotional journey. I raised the point on our last episode. I said this wasn't a story that I feel like we needed to tell until I saw it. And now it makes so much sense. But at the same time, it doesn't override anything. It's very respectful. The level of creativity in the writing and direction to take that degree of care with how you set everything up, to say, we're not going to discount any of the work that have come before. We're going to elevate it. We're going to celebrate it. I think speaks so much to how good the creative team was behind this.
In very much the keyword you said there is journey, because it gave me a lot of the same feeling that I felt when like watching the final episodes of Clone Wars. We know Ahsoka and Rex live, die. We know Ahsoka and Rex live and make it to Rebels, but it's about the how. How did they do it? So like when you're telling a story that you already know the end journey or the end point, the story's about the journey. And I had this moment where watching the first episode and seeing how Obi-Wan was and how like broken and traumatic he was, it hit me that man in episode 1 would not have helped Ezra in Rebels. He would have just let him die. And it just, telling a story that's the journey is just as important as the end goal. And I think that is a very important and beautiful thing to tell, because it's not a so many writers talk about how and why the journey is the most important part, that if you skip the filler episodes, there's a great quote from Matt Braley, who is the creator of Amphibia, and he was talking about this episode called Bessie Michelangelo, which is, on the surface, it seems like a filler episode, but the big subplot of this episode is Anne dons this armor, and she's like, no, this is me, like this is this point. And he said that if you're writing this off as filler, you're missing the journey of the character.
And what was one thing, moving us along a little bit, what was one thing that you disliked or might critique about the show, or thought the show maybe could have done a little bit better?
I actually don't have a lot of critiques. I will say I've only watched the episodes once, and 2 of the episodes I had COVID, so there's like this kind of fever dream in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So to be clear, that bit where Kazuda Xiono randomly shows up and he has Flix and Orca with him, and they're running through the Fortress Inquisitors in the back. That wasn't real.
Oh no,
that didn't happen. I regret to inform you that did not actually happen in the show.
Flix and Orca are like moving. They're like, it's free real estate. This is ours now.
They just show up at the place in Japan, like, oh yeah, we can scrub a little elbow grease on this. We could get that hole patched up at the ceiling.
A fixer-upper. We'll just flip it and
fixer-upper. It's a house flip. Flix and Orca become house flippers.
I want their Antiques Roadshow show, like miniseries on YouTube. I really want it. So because I've only seen it once, like I'm still very much on the emotional high. So it's kind of hard for me to pick a criticism. Right. So I think my criticism is probably my ongoing criticism that I have with all live action Star Wars. And which is part of the reason why I love animation so much, is I have a lot of issues with how human-centric Star Wars is at times, because there are so many, because of the limitations of live action. Like I would look at the scene of like them, what's the planet, like where they were all hiding out and Reva was like, I'm attacking you, and Obi-Wan's like, I'll sacrifice myself. What was that planet?
Which time? Because he does that.
That's the third episode. It's the third episode.
When like Vader like rips open, when Vader like rips open a ship. That one.
Oh, Jabim.
That's Jabim.
Yeah. Like there's like these big shots, and there's like one alien, and it's like there's like one like 3 aliens. And it's like a Nikto family, and the rest are all humans. And I'm like, you get these other like medias, like the High Republic. There's so many aliens that are Jedi, and like. And I guess you could argue it's because the Empire is like wiping out and is like, definitely specious. There's a lot of speciesism in Star Wars. That's the whole point of Thrawn's story in the Thrawn novel. But it's also just a limitation of live action. And I think that you can tell a lot of very interesting coded stories with alien species. And like they've fallen in this like weird place, which is also a good thing. I'm going to preface this by saying it's a good thing. Before we got so much diversity in Star Wars, aliens were the coded characters for like queer characters or BIPOC characters and stuff like that. But it's so good that we're getting all this diversity starting like really coming to the franchise. There's still like stories that I feel like you could tell with aliens. Like there's this very powerful moment in Lost Stars where Thane Kyrell sees these like lizard people as slaves. And that is his turning point of what the fuck am I doing here? Why are we subjugating these people? Why are we invading? Oh my god. And it's just I love seeing aliens in Star Wars. I love like the puppetry and the makeup and all that. And I just the TV format really limits to having these like cool characters. Like you don't really have cantina scenes anymore. Like you go into the Book of Boba Fett, and, like you have like the one Weequay barkeeper, and that's really it. But like we know that's not true on Tatooine. It's a very like rich environment with so many different people because we have the cantina scene from the original trilogy. So I really miss having aliens in live action Star Wars in a TV format. And that's where animation just sings so well to where you can have a character like Zeb. Zeb is my favorite character of Rebels, and he's great. And he's like, he would be just such a nightmare to do in live action.
Who else is terrified that we will see live action Zeb?
Oh, I mean, I know we are.
I want it for meme reasons because it will be a meme and it's gonna be like Ugly Sonic.
Well, Ugly Sonic all over again. Absolutely.
We do kind of know what a live quote unquote live action Lasat's going to look like because Jaro Tapal is one, and Fallen Order is pretty photorealistic. So,
but even then, it's computer animated. Like if you wanted that, like just to do his feet, you're gonna have to do those like weird, like those like centaur cosplay feet because his like feet are weird. But like, or a character like Flix, if you ever had a Gazo in live action Star Wars, it's probably going to be a puppet or of some kind to operate its like legs and arms. And so like, I do miss that innovation of like alien creatures in all live action Star Wars. It bothers me. I like non-human centric stories. I think Zeb's story is so powerful because his species was eradicated and he's a survivor of a genocide. It makes him interest like that. That's a story of his that's dropped when he's like, I guess Callus and I are boyfriends now.
I have decided that the hot sideburns man. This is my focus. No, but then he takes the hot sideburn man home.
Yeah, to his like family. So
it's like,
well, his family. They're not his family, but like, yeah, I guess that's my like ongoing big gripe and like the execution of it.
Look, but you got to refer to the defaults. You know what my one thing I disliked about episode 4 was? It was one shot of Vader's cape that looked a little weirdly digitally lit. That was literally the thing that I had to find in that episode to be like, the one thing I disliked was this one movement of Vader's cape. And 5, I think I finally pulled the card of, nah, we're not doing this.
But I mean, it goes back to like A New Hope. Like if they can have a cantina scene with like a shit ton of different aliens, like that are literally put together with like duct tape and like werewolf masks, like why can't you now with even more money and technology do this more? Because they have way more money now than they did when making A New Hope.
Well, and to that point, like when we were rewatching the episodes today, I was watching the first 2, and when they're on Tatooine in the first and the second episode, and you know they kind of go in like the town square kind of area, and it's mostly humans. I thought about that too, and I was like, huh, you're right. That is kind of weird. Like, why not just take the puppets you made from Force Awakens and, you know, Rise of Skywalker and just reuse them and just repurpose them, you know?
Or fucking Book of Boba Fett.
Yeah, anything from that. Yeah.
For all its faults, there were some scenes on Tatooine where they had crowd shots and they had some weird ass aliens.
Yeah.
Book of Boba Fett. They had fucking the little weasel in a bikini randomly in the background. They had Trandoshan.
She was great.
Right.
Wookiees, they had like, well, there was one Wookiee, Black Chrysanthemum, but even Book of Boba Fett, for all Book of Boba Fett is an show. There's another show that gets better if you just binge watch it, because the pacing is so much better if you just watch it on one sitting. But even that show was weird, got weird with its aliens.
And I guess like it just makes it visually boring, you know? It just makes it like visually bland. Other than like looking in the background like, oh, where's Christina Ariel this week?
She is, I could pinpoint when she's on screen.
Yeah, like other than looking for like Christina Ariel, like it just makes all those like big wide shots like visually boring.
And to that point, we talked about this, how the first episode and the second episode are so jarringly different is because when they go to Dayu, which is basically Star Wars Tokyo, that's where they save Hong Kong. I'm sorry. That's where they saved all their costuming and like stuff budget, because they threw it all in that
weird
scene.
Shit on Dayu.
Yeah, they put some
great,
weird stuff on
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. It looks so good.
There's like, some weird shit.
I would even take like masks like at this point, or just it's just so that's probably my biggest criticism, but that's my ongoing criticism in general for live action Star Wars.
They have some nice weird ones in episode 2 and 3, and then they kind of drop them when they hit episode 4.
Except for like that, what is his name? Freck. He is
Freck in episode 3. Freck carries episode 3 in weirdness all by himself.
As that is the most realistic, timely, chilling, horror-inspiring scene in all of Star Wars. Like there's that moment. Like
the bit where he walks around the back of the truck and sees the Blue Lives Matter flag on the back of the truck and is like, oh.
I live in Georgia. That's me every time I drive around and I see a Confederate flag stuck to the back of someone's truck.
Literally, like, Bradley and I, when that episode aired and we covered it, Bradley and I used to live in Georgia. Bradley currently lives in Georgia. We had an extended discussion about the Confederate flag. And like I've gotten in Ubers before in Georgia where they have the Confederate, at the time the Confederate flag, because Blue Lives Matter wasn't a thing, but they would have the Confederate flag like in the back window of the car, and you would get in and you'd be like, okay, my goal is to get out of this car alive.
I would have been like, oh no, you're not my Uber, and then call another one.
Right.
Because that happens. Or like somebody you're having a perfectly lovely conversation with, and then they go to get in their car and it has the Confederate flag on the back of it.
I mean, yeah, like that character is so well done, as horrific and chilling as he is. Like that was one of the most memorable characters to me, because at first I thought it was interesting. I was like, oh, interesting, and like an alien character supporting the Empire. You don't really usually the ones that's subjugated, and then you see the flag on the back of the truck. It's like, oh, everything makes sense now.
The nice thing about that, like, I love the detail in the politics in that episode, because it doesn't explicitly come out and say what's going on. Mm-hmm. You have to pay attention to the details. When he comes up to the truck is empty. When he gets up to the checkpoint, they ask him how he's doing. And he said, well, the quarry's running a bit dry. We have to dig again. And then like the next scene or 2 scenes later, when they're in the briefing room and they've just found Obi-Wan and they're talking about Mapuzo, they say the Empire is strip mining the planet. Mm-hmm. They are taking advantage of him. And he is in a position to recognize that the Empire is strip mining the planet, and they don't actually care about him. But he's just so gosh darn happy that about those order. Gosh darn insurgents were put in their place, and everything is super okay with the status quo. But of course, there's no politics in Star Wars.
But
there's no
like,
politics in Star Wars.
That's why it's so timely, because there's so many times. It honestly reminded me of members of my family where they're like, "No, I like structure and order," like because they're not the ones that are losing rights. Because it's all structure and order until your rights get taken away, and then people are like, "Oh God, it's too late now."
Yeah, definitely. Like people, if it doesn't affect them personally, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And they're just, I'm just going to keep my head down. There's a great line from Rogue One, where Saw Gerrera says to General, so this is maybe one of my favorite exchanges in all of Star Wars. Saw says, I'm paraphrasing, are you content to let the Imperial flag, see the Imperial flag reign above the galaxy? And Jen replies, you can't see it if you don't look up.
It's not a problem if you don't look up.
Mm-hmm. The show never explicitly comes out and says, this is what our politics are about, this is what's going on. It's in the details. It's in the world building. It's in the production design of this show is so good. And the way Deborah Chow, who has previously been she's a TV director. That's what she does. She directs episodes of TV. Where is your feature film? Where's your 3-picture deal? Mm-hmm. Give Deborah Chow whatever she wants. Like, give it to her. Do a trilogy of movies with Deborah Chow helming one and Bryce Dallas Howard doing another one. And then, I don't know, pick a third female director for the third one. Those are the 2 Star Wars female directors of live action thus far that I can think of.
So far, yeah. Well, and then I guess they already have on the back burner they have for Rogue Squadron.
Patty Jenkins.
So,
we'll see how Rogue Squadron turns out.
But that's a good
in 2027 when we finally
possibly
get it.
Right. Yeah. Whenever it eventually comes out.
I'll do mine. I did my original.
Well, you did like 5 different ones technically, so
because I just have so much to say.
I know.
I have a weekly Star Wars podcast. I literally cannot shut the fuck up about Star Wars. I've joked to my boyfriend, I was like, anytime we go to an event, right, dispatch me for 30 minutes. And if you then go looking for me, you will find me with at least 2 other people having an animated discussion about Star Wars. That is just who I am as a person. I will zero in on whoever it is that's talking about Star Wars and be like, hello, yes, I have opinions. I was going to go with the fitting into continuity so well, but I think for my one thing I liked, I am going to keep on the same track that I'm currently on and just talk about the details of the show and the world building of the show and the production design and the structure and how they've set everything up. Like the whole thing with Freck or the final episode. So I thought it was weird, right? That they got Bonnie PSE. I apologize, Bonnie, if you're listening, for the gross mispronunciation of your name that I keep doing. Where they got her back to play Beru. I was like, oh, that's nice. They got her to play in one episode. And then in episode 6, it's like, but the detail in even that whole sequence with what we learn about the Lars family. She has guns hidden in the homestead that Owen didn't know about.
She wants to slap the shit out of the Inquisitor. Like, no, just like, no.
Well, and I raised the point too because I was clipping whatever our second TikTok this week is going to be, and I think I've settled on. No, it wasn't this one. It was a different one. But one of the contenders was a bit where I talk about the moment where Owen kicks over the potted plant onto Reva. And I raised the point that that is a plant. They don't have a lot of them, and Owen has had to spend water to keep this thing alive. And he knocks it on Reva's environmental damage without a second thought. So that's the fact that they have these plants and he's kept them alive says things about him. The fact he tossed it at Reva says things about him. Obi-Wan Kenobi doesn't feel like it needs to stop and explain to you what's going on in the show or who the characters are. It shows you the visual storytelling and the choices that it makes. My thing that I disliked, I did not pick a thing about the show. I want to talk about the conversation around the show. Okay. And specifically, a lot of the discussion that was had prior to episode 5. Because as Bradley will tell you, I was getting increasingly annoyed with this. The level of ridiculous toxicity around this show was insane. There was more pushback on this one than there has been historically. That is good and fine. More of that. If the discussion is toxic in quotes because people are pushing back against racism, sexism, and just generally being shitty at criticizing things, that is a-okay with me. But it felt like a lot of the discussion that I was having to see, Gingers Are Plants on TikTok, I have quoted this person immensely when they said this, but it has lived rent-free in my brain since they said it. They said something like Reva knowing that Anakin is Vader in episode 2. The discussion that should have happened was, how does Reva know that Anakin is Vader? That's not a thing she should normally know. The discussion that happened was, the black lady shouldn't know that he's Vader. That's a plot hole and broke the original movie. And shut up. Shut up.
It's like we have entered this time period where people don't understand how television shows work. And I don't know what exactly is this downfall of just like, yeah, it's episode 2. There's still 4 more fucking episodes. Like, let the show fucking finish. I'm sure it's different like if we reached the end of the show and it was never explained, then it's a valid question.
Right. Yeah. Then you have a point. But yeah.
It's just like, does people not understand how television functions and works? Like I run into this a lot with like, because I'm so much in animation circles, I run into this problem with young fans learning how to consume media for the first time. And like specifically like from the get-go, when I saw the character of Lilith in Owl House, I was like, she's having a redemption arc. She's going to have a redemption arc. And at the end of season 1,
obviously, she immediately became one of my favorite characters, and I immediately singled in on like, that's a redemption arc.
After like Agony of a Witch, like people were just like swearing, and I was like, man, I really love how Lilith is written. And these like little fucking teenagers were coming at me and like, you're having all these bad takes and blah blah blah. I'm like, you don't understand. Like, you're so young and you're still learning how to consume media. And like, so I'm very like gracious and patient with like young fans learning, but we're talking about like fucking 30-year-olds, like people like adults that like should know how to consume media and understand how television shows work. It's episode fucking 2. There's still 4 more episodes.
I still think that hey dipshit press play may be one of my favorite rants that I went on over the course of the show. I was talking about, if you watch the show, it will explain it. There's a thing to be said. There was a conversation that I had the other day with somebody about the dagger from Tross. And why is the dagger, and I was sort of quoting Darth Chaco a little bit, but I was talking to this person about like, why is the dagger from Tross there and how does it work? And I was sort of explaining to them that the movie does a bad job of explaining this. What's going on is, you know, it's not an ancient dagger. It's just a dagger that's done terrible things. It's specifically for Ochi. That's why it leads to the Death Star, yada, yada, yada. The coordinates are literally printed on the dagger. But like, the movie does a bad job of explaining this because the movie just feels like it's making this shit up as it goes along because of the way it's written. And that's something to have a conversation about.
What if they were on the wrong cliff? It wouldn't line up.
And I mean, it is pulpy and ridiculous, but looking at it and analyzing it, it's the same mentality of looking at the dagger and saying, why is the dagger like this? The movie is bad at explaining it, but let's think this through versus the dagger took them to the ruin of the thing from 30 years ago when it's supposed to be ancient. That happened, plot hole, bad. I'm like, it's not my favorite thing either, but please think about it for 5 seconds. And then just like, I had raised the point too of like taking criticism that is made and spinning it to attack other people really irks me. Because I remember there was concern after the Grand Inquisitor got stabbed in episode 2. And Hope, you had this concern. And I also had the same concern. I was like, are we going to address this? Because he shows up in Rebels. Are we going to address this by the end of the show? But a lot of people waited very patiently to see what would happen. And lo and behold, he pops up in episode 5. Well,
I had a visceral reaction just because it's one of my favorite characters in Star Wars.
Right.
Like, so, like, I remember tweeting, like, they're not retconning Rebels, surely not. But, like, it was a fear because we've had mild retcons before. But Rebels is such a major property. But mostly my reaction was, my baby got stabbed. His sexy abs have holes in them.
I had somebody privately, I'm not going to put this person on blast. They're a friend of mine. But I had somebody privately, we were having a conversation, and this person was like, Disney doesn't know what it's doing. It has no internal consistency. If they don't bring this character back, it will ruin Star Wars forever. Kathleen Kennedy has ruined everything. And I'm like, it is 2 episodes in. And having mild concern that they might pull a Kanan Jarrus again is different than declaring that the entire show is bad and irredeemable because it did a thing that you don't understand a third of the way through it.
You're referring to Kanan Jarrus in Bad Batch, right?
I am. My biggest moment of being annoyed.
Okay, yeah. That's just me clarifying, just making sure that we're on the
Yes,
same page.
I'm referring to the bit where Bad Batch overwrote
the Kanan comics.
Even that, I've heard explanations from people as to how that could work. And I'm the type of person that likes to. You remember me rationalizing Orla Jareni suddenly getting an accent? I will try to rationalize these things in my head, but the thing that I didn't like was maybe I was just seeing more of them, the level of ridiculous bad faith from people with large followings too, who were just like, well, I just say my opinion. And I'm like, dude, people take your opinion and leave it as comments on other people's videos. You have to be careful.
There's also this whole thing where these opinions are transforming into dog whistles, especially like racist dog whistles or attacking queer people dog whistles. So like a lot of these people are just like, oh, I just don't like Reva as a character. And it's like, yeah, but you also didn't like Kelly Marie Tran or like what's her name? She plays Rey.
Daisy Ridley.
Thank you. My brain just stopped. Like these are becoming the same. It's one thing to not like a character. Like that's very different. But when you're having the exact same argument for not just women and gay people and like people of color, like it becomes a pattern, and it's these quote unquote I'm just having an opinions are transforming into dog whistles to like rally up like the fandom is.
Exactly. And like, because people know that even if I'm not a racist, your audience is. And that's why they've latched on to you, is because you are providing them with the ammunition they will use to attack people of color or queer people or women.
And I won't say who because I don't want to put this Disney creator on blast. But I have a casual acquaintance with one of the creators of a show, and these people are very good at looking professional. And he didn't realize that he had liked a tweet from one of these very racist people. And I had to I DM'd him privately and I explained the situation, like who they were and stuff like that. And he was completely tricked by them because on the surface,
it's not the first version of the story that I've heard or personally borne witness to.
Yeah, and especially for someone like him as a creator, he gets so many like notifications of like fan art and fan creations and blah, 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 and people writing articles about his show that he doesn't have time to vet every single person. And and that's also very scary that these people, because they monetize this hatred, they also can now spend the money to look professional, to spin these crazy stories and theories and hatred. And it does become a cycle. And then the clickbait, it was crazy. Like the
good lord, the
fucking clickbait that it was just like, will Luke Skywalker die in the Kenobi show?
So that article actually, I've had to defend that article to multiple people because.
Okay, please do. I didn't click on it. I was like, I'm not giving you. Okay, no, I did not want to click on that.
The article is making a point about clickbait.
Oh, interesting.
The article is a satire. So the author goes through and genuinely lists out like 5 reasons that they could potentially kill Luke Skywalker off in the finale. But the point that they're making at the end is that this type of article is ridiculous. Obviously, they're not going to kill Luke. Why would you write something like this except to get enraged clicks and likes?
Right.
And the fact that multiple people have discussed this article without knowing that it's satire.
Oh, and I just fell for it too.
Raises the same point. Ooh. No, I mean, no shade to people, but that article was making that point really effectively and creatively well, that when you write an article like that, it will get discussed in this context and get attention, regardless of whether or not people actually read the article. Because
that's so smart.
It was genuinely a good. It's interesting satire because it was mistaken for the thing it was intending to satirize, and that was the point of it.
Oh, that's so cool.
So, but it was that same type of thing, like. And I was almost glad that Obi-Wan Kenobi was only 5 weeks because we didn't have some of the ridiculousness like we did for Mando with its 8-week run. Theories swirling and leaks, and will X character show up? And
but that's actually something I really love about fandom. Like, that's one of my favorite parts about fandom. Like, that's actually why I prefer the weekly format over binge, only just because I like. But that's it can easily go bad, which is very much the conversation we're having right now. Because it can turn toxic, it can turn bad, and like, but I do enjoy that part of like just chatting with my friends in DMs and just being like, oh my god, like, what do you think is gonna happen? Yeah. What's your theories? Do you think Satine will show up? Oh my god, Satine flashback.
Getting in Discords and getting on DMs with Twitter, or even getting on Twitter itself, or I love listening to different podcasts. I have a rule to not listen to podcast episodes about a show until we have recorded our episode. So because we fell a little bit behind, there was a point where I had this was when I had COVID, and then I immediately moved right afterwards, and then jammed my foot up and couldn't walk and got summoned for jury duty. And there was a lot happening during about a 2-week period. Listeners of the show will recognize this as the episode I recorded in the closet. Probably won't be the last time I go back into the closet on this show.
Go back into the closet?
Back into the closet.
Honey.
But one thing I really enjoy is after I've recorded the episode, is I then get to go and listen to other shows cover it. So I get to listen to the Pink Milk episodes. I get to listen to RuPaps. I get to listen to Fulcrum Transmissions. First Steps actually timed their show so they could cover Obi-Wan Kenobi weekly. So the premise of First Steps is that one of the hosts, Andy, they have never seen Star Wars and don't know what's happening in it.
Oh, interesting.
So they have watched through all of the prequels, the Clone Wars, the Bad Batch, and that you can tell they kind of sped up a little bit so that they could watch Kenobi as it aired. Really fascinating. But it's fun for me to get to immerse myself in these discussions, because good fan culture is something that can be very rewarding. And even instances where we don't agree with each other can be very rewarding. The toxicity has built its own cottage industry and has made that cottage industry around inserting itself into these fan spaces and punching holes in them. And that really has irked me about the discussion around this show.
Then I guess the better question is, how do we fix it? What do we do? I find not giving those people platforms, not even giving them the time of day is helpful at times, not retweeting them, but screenshotting.
Screenshotting is great. Oh, 100%.
They want the engagement.
If you're on Twitter, screenshot, block out their name. Don't even give them the promotion. It's an ongoing conversation in the fandom, particularly on social media spaces. Where's the line between I don't want to engage with somebody looking for attention, and where do I need to call out this toxicity where I see it? And that's sort of the issue, is finding the balance between that. Where do I disengage versus where am I going to call this bullshit out?
Yeah, I personally find a lot of joy in not engaging, but purposely just going in and reporting tweets and reporting accounts. That's where I find my happy place. I know everybody has a badge of honor of being blocked by Gina Carano. I love just going and reporting Gina Carano's tweets. That's my favorite thing to do.
Well, I also know that something that has been really cool is when somebody posts something that's especially vile, a lot of people call them out. There was a critic who described Leia in, I think, episode 2 as, quote, so annoying that he wanted to elbow her in the face. Yeah. And everybody piled on dude, she's 10.
Have you never met a 10-year-old girl?
Have you never met a 10-year-old? First of all, have you never met a 10-year-old vert? Second of all, listen to what you just said. You just said, I want to commit violence against a child. What the fuck is wrong with you? But everybody just dogpiled on that, which was correct. And you should do that.
Yes. And I do think it is like a situational thing. Like there are some things that must be called out. There are things that must be called out and that should be said and should be amplified. But like when you're in this like very public space, you have to be held accountable because you are reaching a wide audience. It's one thing when it's like Joe Schmo troll with like 7 followers who may or may not be a bot. It's different when you have a major platform and you're reaching a much wider audience. Like those are the situations where it should be called out. Gravitas and like how he chewed every fucking scene he was in, and it rang so true to his animation counterpart. Like my dream post that I want to write one day is why the Grand Inquisitor is, if not one of them, if not the most important character of Rebels, because he is the catalyst for the show. He is Kanan's narrative foil. He's the reason that Kanan does everything, because he wasn't even going to train Ezra until the Inquisitors showed up. Like he is Kanan's narrative foil, and they were both on the same path, and they fell into 2 different places, and they went 2 different paths until they crossed. And who is it that knights Kanan? It's the Inquisitor. And like I love this character, and he just has this importance. I'm rambling. Where am I going with this?
The Grand Inquisitor translated from animation to live action by Rupert Friend's acting.
And yes, thank you.
Was where we were at.
And so like he has this, but he also is this and fascinating character in the show. He is sassy. Like one of my favorite scenes is like Constantine is behind him talking, and he just kind of gives this look of like, oh, this fucking guy. And he is just this like drama scene chewing person who is a powerhouse in every single scene he's in. But he's also the reason that Kanan grows. And compare that to who he is in Kenobi. He still has all of that. The only difference is that Anakin's not growing. And so you're seeing the Inquisitor in a place where he's kind of stuck. He doesn't have all of his powers. And he also gets taken out for a good chunk of the show. But like the few scenes he's in, he is still this terrifying creature. He is, I call him like, he's the numbers guy. Like he's the one that's like, we can't kidnap senators' kids. What the fuck? And like, he's the only one doing his damn job. Because when Obi-Wan flees the planet after his fight with Vader, there's a fucking Star Destroyer there. Grande was like, no, I'm not going to get my ass chewed out by Palpatine. I'm going to go after those fucking rebels. Like he's the one that knows how to do his job. He's the only one that can do the job, because everybody else is stuck in their bullshit, and he's like, no, I'm gonna do my job and then go home and read my books.
What was interesting to me is the role he served in the first 2 episodes. He's Reva's antagonist. So Reva, if looking at Reva as the protagonist of her own story, for the first 2 episodes, he is her antagonist. And then it becomes the 5th brother, and then it becomes Vader, and then it becomes her own trauma. She goes through several antagonists over the course of the show, but for the first 2 episodes, he is the big force actively pressing against her that she is having to push through. And I thought that was an interesting use of the character. I also thought it was interesting from an acting standpoint, how Rupert Friend managed to do a different character than Jason Isaacs, but the same character.
It was very much him in a different point of his life. He actually reminded me a little bit more of his comic counterpart, and it very much is an earlier part of his life. I thought it translated very well, especially because they're still in this time where there are still so many Jedi to hunt. But they reached this point in the comics where like Vader and him are looking at a list and they're like, wow, we really did kill most of the Jedi. What do we do now? Sit on our asses? What the fuck is going to do?
They even talk about it in the first episode of the show that like, we're running out of Jedi to hunt.
Yeah, like this is the Inquisitors at their prime, and then they start reaching a point where they start getting killed off, and because there's not Inquisitors to replace them, they become a dying breed as well, and they become the very thing that they're killing because they're dying off, and there's no dark side red saber people to replace them because there are none. There's no Jedi to corrupt because they did their job so well. It actually very much reminded, we just recorded this episode last night, which is why it's fresh in my brain. We were just recording an episode last night of Bad Batch where the Kaminoan prime minister is killed, and he tells Nala say, I fear we created our own detriment. And that's exactly kind of where the Inquisitors are. Like they did their job so well that they cannot continue to survive and function and thrive. And can I talk about the moment where he just comes out and he's just like, surprise, bitch! Thought you thought you'd seen the last of me.
You made the same joke.
Did you? Yeah, because Bradley, you also described that as like a Ryan Murphy moment.
That was
where he comes out.
That was
same
thing.
Yeah,
girl, that was his Mean Girls moment of just like, surprise.
Yeah. Hello.
And that's how the level of petty that he is, that he comes out and he's like, oh, by the way, I need my little, Girl Scout badge just to top it off,
And Vader, who normally is the scene stealer, right? Vader, if Vader is in a scene, Vader is in the center of that scene and everything revolves around him. That is one of the only instances in the show where Vader's just kind of standing back like, I'm appreciating what's going on here. I have trained you well, both in the dark side and in the art of sheer abject pettiness.
Anakin Skywalker is a drama boy. Like, he lives for drama, and like that's him like sitting back just being like, yes, do things for my amusement. No, I love that scene, and I think part of it, I will say, is like some of it was like personal things, because I also write Commander Keeman from the Thrawn novels. He's one of my favorite characters to write in fan fiction, and I write him as the evil Hufflepuff to Grande and Vader. And so I was like, if Keeman was there, like this would be the perfect scene of Star Wars for Hope, because the three of them are evil bros, and Keeman's their evil Hufflepuff.
I will also throw out there that Rupert Friend is extremely hot in person.
Yes.
Just as a side note, Rupert Friend also extremely hot. Just this is important information. I have been in the same room as him at Celebration, and he is an extremely attractive man.
He seems so, and yeah, I
also
loved,
very, very, very lovely from what I saw of him.
I loved his take on it, and to take an animated character and bring it to live action is not easy. I have my own issues with Rosario Dawson and how she handles Ahsoka, but like even then, but like to use someone else like Katie Sackhoff, like that's not an easy transition, bringing Bo-Katan from animation into live action. And I feel like Rupert Friend was the person who has done it best. In his very few scenes, he hit who Grande Boyfriend is, from his Rebels counterparts to his comic counterparts, even to like his post-death comics, where he is still serving Vader as this like horrible tormented ghost, and he's
God bless you, Charles Soule, for
I love
everything
Charles
you're
Soule.
doing in Star Wars 2020 right now.
But there's even hints of
shout
that
out to
sadness.
The comics.
There's even hints of that sadness that he's doing all of this to like no gain, like he is serving Lord Vader. He's trying to be the very best. He wants to go get the rebels because that's the smart thing to do. And this guy's just obsessed with his old Obi-Wan friend. And depending on how you ship it, maybe his old boyfriend. Like there's like all this obsession here. And the dude's just trying to do his job so he can go read his goddamn books. And so like, I think to me, Rupert Friend captured Grande Boyfriend the best of all that translating animation into live action characters. Outside of like Chopper, but he's a droid, so.
and he's gonna be in the Ahsoka show.
He was in Rogue One
for like in the background
for
like 30 seconds.
And then he had his entire web series on Rebels Recon.
That is true. He was the star of Rebels Recon, and he did have a brief character arc on Rebels Recon where he thought he was the star of Rogue One.
And then he went British. I love it. I will say I miss Rebels Recon. I wish more shows had Rebel Recon shows.
I miss Andy Gutierrez talking to Pablo Hidalgo every week.
Mm-hmm.
That was my favorite part.
Can you imagine having a Rebels Recon like show for something like Kenobi, where they like sit down every week with the people and like talk about the episode and like take fan like I miss Rebels Recon.
That was such a good, and it was so chock full of like context and information, and they would answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I also do want to ask before we dive into our second to last, there's a tiny little note I'm going to end on, but before we dive into our second to last major point of discussion, Hope, I do want to ask you, so you're a big proponent of Star Wars animation, and you like to talk about things in the context of Star Wars animation. So I wanted to ask you directly in a place where you could talk about it. What did you think of the relationship between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Star Wars animation?
As much as I do love animation, I feel like this show should have always been live action because of Ewan and Hayden. To use as you were asking the question, the thing that just jumped to my mind was a recent episode of The Nostalgia Critic, and he was talking about Spider-Man No Way Home.
Is he still on?
Yeah.
Is he still doing stuff?
Yeah.
I was watching The Nostalgia Critic when I was in high school.
Yeah, he took a long break, and he's gotten a lot better.
Do you even know what The Nostalgia Critic is?
No.
Thank God, keep it that way.
Like, I will say, like, he used to be a lot worse and cringy, and they've definitely, like, have righted a lot of their wrongs. But anyway, like, he was talking about Spider-Man No Way Home because that movie has a lot of similar beats to Into the Spider-Verse. And he was arguing that, like, while he thinks that Into the Spider-Verse is a better movie, there are things that only No Way Home could do, being the climactic fight between Tom Holland, the Green Goblin, and as Tom Holland is about to like kill the Green Goblin, Tobey Maguire comes out and stops him. And he was saying that only Tobey Maguire, they didn't even have dialogue in that scene. Only the reason it's powerful is because of the fact it's Tobey Maguire who is redeeming himself from his movies, and only Tobey Maguire could make that scene work. And that's how I feel about this show. As much as I love animation, and I love Matt Lantern, I love and like how he does Anakin and everything and all that, there is something so special about it being Ewan and Hayden, and especially like that final fight where his mask is broken open and like they are seeing each other with their actual eyes, and it is the OG guys there. And only they could do it, to have Ewan crying, looking at Hayden, and Hayden smiling and going, I killed Anakin. Wouldn't work as well in animation, because the reason the Ahsoka Vader fight works is because it started in animation and ended in animation. If they did the Ahsoka Vader fight with Rosario and Hayden, it would be so vastly different, and it would hit differently because it's not Ashley and Matt.
It's the fact that it's Ashley and Matt. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Real fast, that part of the interesting thing to me about the two is that both Ashley and Ewan are talking to their Anakin Skywalker.
Yes.
Yes. Ewan is talking to Hayden. Ashley is talking to Matt.
Yes, and that's why it works. So as this show should always be live action, as it always had to be Hayden and Ewan in that final moment looking each other down, because that is not just the emotional weight of the characters, the emotional weight of the last 20 years of prequels. They were the guys who formed that bond for us prequel kids to grow up with, to now have this nostalgia.
And I think there's something to be said too for mediums. The idea of something maybe working in one medium and not necessarily working in another. And is this a story that is the most effective in live action, where we can see the actors emoting? Is this a story that's most effective in animation, where the visual design itself and the voice acting is what's going to carry it through? Is this going to be the best on the written word, on a prose book, where you're hearing the voices in your own imagination, where you're simply hearing Mark Thompson's voice? God bless you, Mark Thompson, for cosplaying the entire Star Wars Celebration Anaheim. Getting up on your panel stages in full-ass cosplay. Also, Mark Thompson doing the Skier voice is just lovely in person. I got to hear him do the Skier voice in a room. for the audiobook panel. But
that's
why
my Lady Guardian would have fell apart like Vader ripping open that ship.
he's so talented. This is why when we have conversations about adapting things, there's a lot of conversation about, adapting books into something else or adapting the comics into something. And I look at it and I'm like, it's kind of a case by case basis for me. But the question is, can you make this story work in the other medium and have the same effect?
That's part of the reason why I'm so nervous about the Ahsoka show, because I very strongly feel like that the Rebel story started in animation and it should finish in animation. Like I'm gonna have to check so many biases at the door just to even watch the show, to see a live action Hera that's not Vanessa, to see a live action Sabine that's not Tia, and like to see whoever plays Ezra not being Taylor. Like those are things that I have to check at the door so I don't ruin the experience for myself. But it's also, there's a whole also spiel about like animation is for kids and blah blah blah, and like it's not. It's a fucking medium, and just the backlash to the Oscars and stuff like that. Like there's a big. I don't want to see animation get replaced by live action, because it does have a very. Animation kept Star Wars alive for 10 years. For 10 years, the only on-screen Star Wars we had was fucking Clone Wars. That was it. That was Star Wars, and it kept it alive. And so it has this very important part of Star Wars history. And my biggest fear is seeing animation. Like, it's cool to see Katie Sackhoff in live action playing Bo-Katan. It's cool to see that, but I don't want to lose the importance of her in animation and why that was important in that story that came, and just have it all be rewritten for a live action audience because of the Star Wars funnel, where live action is what's consumed most by people.
When I was texting you through a lot of the panels throughout Star Wars Celebration Anaheim, one of the ones that I had texted you about specifically, but one of the best moments for me was when Dave Filoni came out, and it was at the beginning of the Tales of the Jedi. And basically, like, there had been a lot of conversation, especially after the Ahsoka thing, about it moving. And he basically got out and rebuked the entire idea that animation was secondary to him. And he got up and basically said, no, animation is just as important. It's all Star Wars. It all comes together to form Star Wars.
And they better start fucking paying their animators, because there's a reason that the entire animation community has been under strike for a good part of this year, because they are
New deal for animation, let's go.
New deal for animation, let's go.
New deal for animation, let's go.
Because animation is cinema. And like, I just type in the words animation is cinema into Google and read about the backlash that happened to the Oscars. Like, it's so important, and it's also just such an important part of Star Wars history as well.
Like a story like the Clone Wars, you can do it in live action, or you can do it as a comic, and in fact they did in the Dark Horse comics, but it's not going to be the same as animation. That was a story that the way they told it, it's really interesting to me reading Clone Wars Stories of Light and Dark. Sorry, Brad. Oh no, Asajj Ventress is in Stories of Light and Dark. So there's another book you could, don't fucking roll your eyes at me, Bradley. I felt like I had to address you to remind our listeners that you are in fact still in the room.
I'm here.
But one interesting thing about reading Stories of Light and Dark is it's Clone Wars episodes told through a different medium, and how they are able to use that medium and the strengths of the medium of the written word to do something that the episodes could not do, which is get into the characters' heads and write out what their thought processes are and what they're thinking of things, or say things from a certain point of view that maybe we weren't getting in the episode. Neither one is better than the other. The difference in the mediums led to different experiences of essentially the same story, which I thought was interesting.
Something that I as you were talking, I thought of is, think about the final episode of Clone Wars. Rex is in is in a fighter. Ahsoka is literally running down a crashing ship, like jumping from wreckage to try and get to Rex. How would they do that in live action? Like it would be
Well,
it would be such a spectacle. It'd be so costly. It would really push the limits in the budget and the volume. And it's a scene like that works so well in animation because it can just do the thing. But if you have something like that, like say the climactic battle in Rise of Skywalker, which is kind of similar, they're riding horses across a Star Destroyer and stuff like that. It just looks different, you know? And so like the mediums do have their own places. And Kenobi always needed to be live action. It would just not hit the same way if it was animation, and if it was like, even if it was like Hayden and Ewan voicing, it just still wouldn't
still
hit
not
the same way.
Yeah. I do also think too that one thing it did very well was respecting the medium of animation and what had come before in the animation in some of the small details. Like Vader doing the like Ahsoka pose with the two lightsabers. Like even just a small moment like that somebody could look at and go, "Yep, there's Ahsoka.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Ahsoka in Vader. There's the Ahsoka's influence on Anakin, or vice versa." But I do want to ask, as we're coming up on towards the end here, I want to ask both of you and then answer myself. So there's been a lot of talk about more Obi-Wan Kenobi. There's been a lot of talk about where do we go from here. Kathleen Kennedy has said that if there is demand for it, they will make it. The screenwriter of the original Obi-Wan Kenobi movie has claimed that there was actually ideas for 3 movies worth, and this was just the first one. But I want to ask both of you, what would you think of a potential sequel, and what would you want that potential sequel to look like? Bradley, you go ahead and go first, since I feel like we need to hear what your voice sounds like. Since
I've been rambling for a while.
No. It's totally fine. I don't like to ruin, if we're having a really good discussion, I want to make sure that we get it all on tape, essentially, before because I can edit everything down. That's not a problem. But I do want to make
me
sure.
out completely.
Right. Yeah. I still have to remove like half of Charles's, rants from this episode.
Look,
so
if Bradley could remove people entirely from the show, I wouldn't be on the show.
Right. No, but okay. So in terms of a Kenobi sequel, I hate using that word because, again, that it's like the idea of like, oh, well, this is a limited series. And it's like, oh, well, it was so popular, we have to do a season 2. It's like, well, I don't think that's what's going to happen. So my theory, or my theoreticalness of this potential sequel will not necessarily be another Kenobi show necessarily. I think there's a couple ways you could do it. Theoretically, yes. If we are going to do another thing with Kenobi, it would have to be another live action Ewan thing. I don't know what that would entail. That would be interesting to see. I also thought maybe in a couple years, another interesting thing would be to do another, maybe young Leia centric Vivian Lyra Blair, like, when she gets a little older, maybe when she's a teenager and coming back to the role, possibly playing a young Leia, something like that would be interesting to me. And like, because these are like what I'm thinking of and what I'm coming up with are not necessarily Kenobi sequels, right? These are things from Kenobi that you can use.
Like a Path show about Roken and Haja.
Exactly. Yeah, something along those lines.
I'll go ahead and reveal my big thing. I have 2 potential sequel-ish things that you could do, and one of them that I'll say now because I think it'll contribute to the ongoing discussion is my hope is that rather like Mando spun off the quote-unquote Mandoverse, rather than see a direct sequel to Obi-Wan Kenobi where he's the protagonist again, I'd like to see it spin off into different shows about different people, the way we have Mando, but then also the Book of Boba Fett's first half, or Ahsoka. Not to throw shade on the Book of Boba Fett, but I am going to throw shade on the Book of Boba Fett. But the idea of Reva, telling a story about Reva and have that be its own thing, or telling a story about Haja and Roken in the Path, and where does that go from here? And continue on through this time period exploring these different people.
I would love if they do a Reva show, like having Kenobi almost be her master from afar, where she's just like, I'm a spy, I'm backsliding, and like so and he's kind of that pseudo Ben Kenobi that he is to Luke at the time, where he's just kind of there to guide her, but the show is still mostly about her, but like he might check in every once in a while to like ground her a little bit and like remind her why she's doing things.
So like Reva's love Victor to Obi-Wan Kenobi's love Simon.
I've never seen either. I'm a bad gay.
Sort of.
Bradley,
I was thinking more like
shows?
The way I was processing what she was just saying was more like Kenobi becomes the Anakin and Reva becomes the Ahsoka. Because Anakin,
so I should,
yeah,
Kenobi,
or even to like connect it back to Rebels. Like we get Yoda 2 times when Ezra really needs Yoda.
Right.
And like, and it's 2 moments where like he needs somebody to guide him through the Force. And those are like 2 moments where like Obi-Wan could step in and be like, here's some advice. And then like Reva's like, okay, I'm writing it down. I'm going to do my own thing and figure this out.
So the plot of Love Victor, very, very, very briefly. So you have Love Simon, which is the film that came out, and that's about a straight actor playing a gay teenager, and it's like a rom-com, and it's a movie that I watched. And then they did a spin-off series, Love Victor. And in Love Victor, Victor is a straight actor playing a gay teenager. You can tell I'm a little mad about these 2 things, but he asks the inciting into the show is that he asks Simon, the protagonist of the film, for advice through Instagram DM. And throughout the season, as Victor is going through his own struggles, he will reach out to Simon and Simon will like give him advice. And over the course of the show, eventually like they stop talking as much and Victor finally tells him, I don't need you anymore. I can sort of figure my own stuff out from here. So that would be an interesting relationship where Obi-Wan just kind of pops in. It's a Reva show, but he pops in occasionally to dispense advice while he's off meditating with Qui-Gon and doing a weird Force-centric movie with midichlorians that we're never going to see.
Well, so here's the thing. Okay, I was trying to like not do too much of this because I don't like speculating too much, but I had 2 different
You
Reva
fucking
show
love
ideas.
speculating. What the fuck are you on about?
Well, I had 2 different. You will
speculate till the goddamn cows come home.
So I had 2 different Reva show ideas. And I thought these would be good ways to incorporate certain characters into the Star Wars franchise that could come into it that exist in other media. I kind of hinted at this when we did our finale, when you were like, who is the person that could do this show with Reva? And I have 2.
Yes, I do want to know the answer to this.
So I have 2 versions of this show that I theoretically could do with Reva. Okay. And my second one,
right in the face.
I know. Okay. So this is the pitch deck. You guys are Kathleen Kennedy and Disney corporate, right? You guys are there.
Why do I have to be Bob Chapek? Hold on.
I want to be Disney corporate. Girl, well, anyway, beautiful, Kathleen.
Okay. Well, whatever. You guys are Kathleen and Disney. So this is what I'm pitching to her. Okay. So my idea is this. I have 2 kind of vague ideas. So we know that the video game Jedi Survivor happens during the Kenobi show that's coming out soon. And because I did my research and I looked this up.
You didn't look it up, bitch. I told you the second Jedi Survivor dropped.
Well, anyway, my thing is, so my first version, my first version of this show would be essentially a team up between Reva and Cal Kestis. And the reason why I think they would work together in a show in this aspect is because, one, they're both young people, right? So it works out because they're just young. And so there's already an audience of, I can see myself in these characters, right? You have everything there because they're young people, but also because they're 2 sides of the same coin. They are both young Jedi / Padawans, younglings, whatever, who had to go through the purge and then had to diverge and go on their own. And then they both took very different paths. So Reva, i.e. being more dark-sided path, Cal kind of trying to do good, whatever. I didn't play the video games, but I assume he's a hero, right?
Clearly we can tell, but yes, he is.
Right. But so I think that would be an interesting concept.
Because Cal couldn't save Trilla. and he would have a second chance with Reva.
Spoilers for Jedi Fallen Order. It would be.
It's like 5 years old.
It's 5 years old. We know what the end of Jedi Fallen Order was.
But that's a good point, is that, the only other quote character that is a main character in that series is an Inquisitor female woman, person. And that's an interesting take. Like, if he has to kind of, be like, oh, I need redemption in some aspect of his life.
I'm gonna jump in here real fast. Bradley has not played the game. He does not know about Seer Junta or Grease or BD1.
Okay.
So when he says only other main character he knows.
You've seen Mando season 2, so you've seen a version of BD1. He's a sweet boy. He has little tippy tap feet.
The BD canonically stands for best droid. This is canon because I said it was canon. And I'm going to keep insisting it's canon until Wikipedia updates to reflect my view on the world. Because as a white man, I feel like this is how I can make things happen. I will just keep insisting it's true until it becomes true.
What's the other pitch?
Okay, yes, well, first, wait, give me your rating on that one. What do you think? Out of 5 stars, what would you give that? Theoretically, if that was something they would do, if you like it.
I could see it, especially because the actor that plays Cal looks just like his character because they just modeled him. So they already have an actor to play Cal because he does it anyway. I think that'd be interesting to bring the video games a little bit more to the forefront. So I dig it.
The original pitch I would have given a 3. You explained the parallels, and I bumped it up to a 4. That's a 4-star pitch right there.
Okay, so
I maybe would want to see a treatment.
Okay. Well, I would have you do it because I don't know anything about Cal Kestis. So you're going to have to write
if you were to pitch that to me as an executive, I maybe would want to see a treatment.
Gotcha. Okay. So now here we go. Here's my secondary pitch that I feel a little bit more passionate about because I think the parallels in this version work better, but there's a little bit of an age discrepancy that I don't know if this works, but you know what? Not that Star Wars gives a fuck about age discrepancy or whether or not you're related to somebody, because incest is great.
Clone Wars was 3 years.
So, Padme is only 5 years older than Anakin, and it's disgusting and gross that they're together or something. So that I'm just prefacing with that. Okay.
Wait until they learn about Han and Leia.
Right, but that's my point. Exactly. I don't think it necessarily meant. Okay. So
please just tell us who this person is.
So this person was actually name dropped in the show. Okay.
Jesus fucking Christ, Bradley.
Now,
Jesus, Bradley.
Hold on. Hold on. Okay.
I don't know this. I don't know this, so I want to hear it.
Before you jump on me, I think a Reva and Quinlan Vos show would work really well. Ooh. And let me tell you why. So both are alive, obviously. So that's one big thing. The other thing.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Now, canon says, theoretically, I think it said he was last seen during the Purge or whatever, Order 66. So he's around 38-ish around that time. So he's basically the same age as Kenobi. That's kind of the whole point I was trying to make, is that he's around 48-ish in Kenobi. So that's where this next part's going to get a little weird, because Reva is only theoretically 18 to 21. And I am kind of pitching this as a romance.
So Bradley, I think
wait.
I see what you've done here.
I want to add.
Please continue, but I see what you've done here.
We're almost there. I want this to be a redemption show for both of them, because Reva's story arc now is she, theoretically needs redemption, but she's not dead, so she can do whatever she wants to make good on all the bad things she did, right? Quinlan also is theoretically doing that already because he's working with the path and trying to make good on his thing. My thing is, Quinlan lost the love of his life, Ventress, who is also a dark-sided diva.
I was hoping you were going to go to Dark Disciple. I was like, Dark Disciple.
So here's my pitch for the show. My pitch for the show is this is a dual show with Reva redeeming herself, right? Quinlan is redeeming himself in that he is seeing what he could have done and the things that he could have done differently with Ventress in his flashbacks versus what he's now doing with Reva, and that is his new kind of redemption love for all the bad past.
If you want an adaptation of Dark Disciple, just pitch an adaptation of Dark Disciple. Sneaky fucking twink.
Hey, as Disney corporate, I'm coming in for some notes.
Okay, great.
I love the idea, except for the romantic aspect of it, because ages are gross. But I do think he would be an interesting master. And we were talking earlier about like a path show. Like
Mhm.
she could join the path
Right.
and he could be part of it. And like, so they're like, he understands what it's like to fall to the dark side, what it's like to go through that and having to redeem and fix his mistakes. And he's been doing that. So he could become a new master to her, and having this like seeing, I don't want to say like a Kanan. I love like the new Jedi, like the post Order 66 Jedi. So like Kanan and Ezra and Rey and Luke, because they're very different Jedi from the prequel Jedi. But
Right.
when you have someone like Quinlan who is older, he was very much a prequel Jedi, but he was still unconventional. And so he has to learn how to adjust in a new era of how to break the dogmatic ways of the prequel Jedi who did harm him. They gave him trauma. He lost the love of his life because of the dogmatic ways of the Order. And so now he has a new chance to help form what the new Order will look like. So I actually really love that idea. And you could still have like Roken and Haja and like them training up these little force sensitive younglings.
I like the idea of Quinlan helping Riva go through a process that Asajj never got to go through. That Asajj got up to the point where she came back from the dark and then died. Looking at you, Katie Lucas. Riva went to the same point and she's still alive. So I think it would be interesting to see Quinlan looking at Riva and kind of seeing this is the chance Asajj never had. And how do I help this young woman come into her own, and because she's gonna have to spend the rest of her life living with guilt over what she did as an inquisitor, and it was all for nothing. So, which is incidentally me inserting my own things in, because guilt and redemption and ongoing guilt and having to live with that for the rest of your life is one of my favorite themes in media. But
speaking as Disney corporate, pitch two.
pitch two.
Okay, good.
Pitch
well,
two.
Yeah, the romance thing was a stretch, but I was just trying to have some kind of relationship there.
Look, as much as
platonic master Padawan relationship.
Okay, then that's fine. Let's
and look,
Disney's
whole thing. Look, Disney's whole thing is grumpy dads adopting like
wild
colorful,
children,
bouncy kids.
Wild children.
So having the reverse with a colorful, bouncy dad adopting a grouchy kid, gold. As much as I do love Cal Kestis, Cameron Monaghan, if you ever decide you don't want to be straight anymore, call me. I am going to go with pitch two.
Oh, I was just going to say, he was a kind of a stretch for me. I just thought that like it would be interesting in his aspect because he's already dealt with inquisitors. So like to have another person who's like an ex-inquisitor, essentially, that would be an interesting dynamic to see together.
Now, I can see the reverse of Riva showing up in the second Fallen Order game.
Hear me out. Riva / Marin.
I've already seen like Riva and Trilla artwork, and it's great. I do want to answer your original question, Bradley, because I've been mulling on it, but I do want to offer a third pitch, because I know we were saying how Haja and Roken would be good for this show, but I think because of the character that Cassian is, and the kind of angry, muddled person that like he opens Rogue One murdering somebody. He's a murderer. He has like his whole driving force is all the horrible things he did in the name of the Republic. I think Riva could be a very interesting character to show up in Cassian, of someone who has done dark deeds and trying to find redemption. Definitely not in season 1, but from season 2 with that 5-year time jump, if Cassian is trying to be a better person but still doing the dirty deeds of the Republic that weigh on his mind, I think Riva could be a really interesting character to help him learn how to manage his own personal darkness in the name of doing something good.
Hope, I do want to circle back around and let you answer the original questions of how do we feel about a potential sequel and what form would you maybe want that to take?
My feelings about the original sequel is it needs to have a good script. I don't want a Toy Story 4. And I feel like Kenobi is so beautifully contained. It's such a beautiful story from start to finish. It's strong and it's powerful, but I don't want it to be like fudge. When you have fudge, it's so delicious, but when you have too much fudge, it makes you sick. And it would have to be the right script. And you have something like the first three Toy Story movies, which is a beautiful story. It tells a single story. It tells its beginning, middle, and end. And it's really good focus on growing up and moving away from the story of Andy and putting a close on Andy in relationship with Buzz and Woody. And then you have Toy Story 4, which is a fine movie. It's like, honestly, I watched the majority of Toy Story 4 going, why was this made? And then I got to the last 5 minutes and I went, oh, okay, I see why this was made. But it still wasn't, it just felt like it unraveled a lot of the plot, the progress, and the point of the first three Toy Story movies.
Right. Exactly.
And so I feel if I agree, if we get anything out of Kenobi, I want it to be side characters. I want to see like Haja and Roken and Reva. I don't really want more Kenobi. I feel like he is an emotional place where we can now see where he's going. He's out of his cave. He's on his way to get his house. He's going to learn from Qui-Gon. He has this relationship with Leia, and he's met Luke. Like, he's in a place to where I feel like if we open up another series about Ewan McGregor as Kenobi, it's just going to start scraping the bottom of the barrel, and it's going to be too much of a good thing. That's how definitely. I really feel about it.
No, I definitely agree. And I think my only other thing I think I would say, and this is the last thing I'll say about sequels for Kenobi, is that the only thing they've done really is if they end up ever wanting to do a sequel, they've opened up the door to where they don't have to stick with the whole thing of he has to stay on Tatooine because he's watching over Luke. Because in the finale, we learn that he has accepted that Owen and Beru can take care of things essentially. And that he has to,
Beru can, hell
right.
Yes.
So he has to, like, he's let go, right? Like, that the whole thesis of the show is like you have to let go of everything. And so he lets go of Luke essentially, and like he can trust that, you know, from afar I can protect him, but I don't have to be like on his ass the whole time and watching him daily and all that stuff that he was doing in the beginning of the series. So the only thing that they've done really is opened up the fact that if we want to do something with Kenobi, we have 9 years to play with. We can have him go fuck off, do whatever he wants for 9 years and just come back to Luke every single time. And as long as he comes back to Tatooine, it's in line with the original movie and nothing can change.
Yeah. I think it has to be the right script. And the one that I actually would almost want is like a take on like Yoda's Clone Wars story about how he figured out how to be a good Force ghost. If they did like a super trippy series of him like figuring out how to be a Force ghost.
Apparently that was going to be the sequel. According to the writer, he said that the second one was going to be about Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, like trying to learn.
Yeah, if it's like trippy Force ghost stuff, like I'd be down for that, but it has to be the right script. If it's not the right script, I don't want to.
It'll feel wrong.
And unfortunately, Kathleen Kennedy will axe a script that she doesn't think is the right script. So
Lord and Miller Solo, I want it.
I'm thinking more of Duel of the Fates.
But Lord and Miller Star Wars, I want it so bad.
They were really gonna have Rey and Poe become a thing.
I just threw up some in my mouth.
They were really straight up gonna do that.
Okay, actually no, all ships are valid. I'm not gonna like yuck on anyone's yums. If people are Rey Poe shippers, and I know there are, like, I am totally for that, and all ships are valid. I will not yuck on anyone's yums because people should ship who they want.
Fair, reasonable. I do like bringing up the sloppy Rey Poe makeout scene in Duel of the Fates, just because that script was wild. I will say, bringing it around to a lot of the points that I was going to make have already been covered, especially the point about it needs to be a good script, it needs to be a story worth telling. If I were going to do an Obi-Wan Kenobi centric sequel, you told me you have to do a show about Obi-Wan Kenobi. You have to do another 6 episodes about Obi-Wan Kenobi. I think there are other elements of the character of Obi-Wan Kenobi that you can explore in a show. This one was about his relationship with Anakin and with the Skywalker twins, and Hope is laughing because she knows immediately who I'm going.
No, I just had this rate of like, I just had this moment of like, Obi-Wan goes into the world between worlds and meets Stellan Geos.
Okay, nix whatever I was gonna say because that I need look. Elzar Man has Elzar Man and Luke Skywalker. Elzar Man and Luke Skywalker have had a conversation canonically in canon.
Yeah,
they
oh
have
my
met
God.
each other.
That
Don't roll your eyes, Bradley. I promise it makes sense. Charles Soule wrote it. But what I was gonna say is like there are other aspects of Obi-Wan Kenobi as a character that you can explore. Cast Nicole Kidman as Satine Kryze.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yes.
You have Katie Sackhoff right there. You have Corky Kryze right there that you're not doing anything with. Do explore that aspect of Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Explore Obi-Wan as the man.
Yeah.
Well,
that would be interesting. Something with his relationship.
How Obi-Wan got his groove back
with them.
Right. That would be very interesting.
Do something like that where, he has an adventure with like a grown-up Corky and who, by the way, is completely his kid. Cast Nicole Kidman as Satine flashbacks.
I've got an idea now. You've given me this idea. Okay, so
I hate doing that.
A way to connect both of the versions of the sequel that we want to do, right? So the idea is that he goes with Qui-Gon to learn all the Force crazy stuff to how to be a ghost. And in doing so, he's so connected to the Force, he finds out about Corky, that he has this fucking son. And then all that stuff goes out the window. He goes, wait, before I can finish this stuff, it's important that I learn this ghost training stuff. I can't be a whole person until I rectify the fact that I have a kid I didn't even know about. And then he goes and finds that
Julia kid. from Star Wars English class, this whole segment was for you. You're probably not listening to the show, but this was for you.
I've read the fan fiction. I had to pull it up. It's my very good friend, A Spark of Hope, underscores between all the words. And she has a fic called I Have Always Loved You. And the whole point of this fic is that Satine was saved. And she has the same like things that Breha Organa has, that like the mechanics or like Fennec Shan to like keep herself alive. And so she's been hiding out for her own safety on Alderaan, and she is Corky's mother, and she pretended to be his aunt to protect him and to protect Obi-Wan. And when she finds out that Obi-Wan is still alive, she seeks him out, and then they rekindle and they have lots of sex, and it's a great fan fiction. But I'm here for it.
Star Wars HBO.
I've read the fan fiction. It's there. Go check it out. It's lovely.
House of the Dragon, but Star Wars. It's
just Star Wars.
Yes. So I do want to wrap it up, and I do want to get to Hope's Pluggables. But before I do that, we have one final matter. We have one more. The thing somebody fucked up. No, I don't, because this is credit to you, Bradley.
Oh, okay.
I meant to do this at the top of the show, but then Hope made a dirty joke right at the beginning, and it completely derailed the whole thing.
I'm sorry. Not sorry.
Okay. That's what we do here. On episode 6, I brought up that some people had pointed out that the slice that we see in Vader's head is in the same spot as where Obi-Wan slices his helmet off. And some people were interpreting that lightsaber blade was what caused that wound. And Bradley, neither of us went as far as to say that's what it was, because I remember specifically saying last week, we haven't checked yet. You went and checked. So.
Yeah, so like when I was, two things. One, someone sent me like, I think pictures from screenshots from Revenge of the Sith. And I think it's kind of hard to tell if I haven't watched the movie itself, but the screenshots are vague enough to be like, oh, he already has the scar from the initial fight when he's like all burned and he's on the lava, thing. And when Sidious is leaning down to like kind of touch him or whatever. And now I didn't go as far to look at the part where he's getting the armor for the first time to see if the scar's there or not, which would be probably an more obvious kind of thing. But rewatching Kenobi, the first time we see Darth Vader in the Bacta tank, it's very small, but I'm pretty sure you can still see the scar already on his head. So.
I noted the same thing because you sent it to me and I hadn't gotten to episode 2 yet. You sent it to me earlier today. I hadn't gotten, so I did note it's not as big as it is in the originals, but it is definitely there. So we have kind of come to the conclusion that probably the lightsaber is not what caused that wound.
I just have to comment on something similar but different. I love that everyone has pointed out that Ahsoka cut one side, Obi-Wan cut the other side, and it's a very sad callback to the Mortis arc where Obi-Wan says, as long as the three of us together, nothing bad can happen. And then my heart breaks. And the only person who could actually save him was Luke, which took off the whole helmet.
I think they literally just said on the Pink Milk recording that, I can't remember, was it Chase who might have said, I really didn't like that they reused that thing from Rebels until someone pointed out to me that it's on the other side of the face. And then I got it.
I mean, I also, about that note about them reusing that too, it's the Star Wars funnel. The most people watch is live action, and then the television shows, and then animation, and then like books and comics. Like, it's the funnel. And so like not everybody has watched Rebels. So that's the first time of us seeing it on live action. So it's hitting a much wider audience. So I didn't mind it, but I do like it's the opposite, because I do like that thematicness of like Ahsoka had one side and Obi-Wan had the other. And Luke is the one that succeeded because he took the whole mask off.
All right. Well, Hope, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Actually, Bradley, I'm really happy to meet you, because I'm actually, I would say I've heard a lot of lovely things about you, but as Charles, but being able to like meet you myself, you are lovely, dear. And
Thank you.
It's a joy to be able to speak with you. And Charles is wrong.
I think Yoda would just love you, Bradley.
My Yoda, my dear sleazy Yoda. No.
He's so much fun.
Charles, don't listen to this part. Charles is mean and you're lovely.
Okay.
Well,
no, it's been such a joy to talk to you.
Thank you so much for joining us. And I need to stop setting. It's 2 fucking hours. It's always 2 fucking hours with these guest episodes because all our guests are amazing. But Hope, if people want to listen to you more, where, please reiterate, can the people find you?
I am one of the co-hosts of Jaig Eyes and Jedi. Like I said, we're currently going through Bad Batch. We're actually almost done. We're in part 1. We just recorded part 1 of the finale. So we're just wrapping up Bad Batch and we're about to go into Mando season 2. You can listen to me there with my co-podcaster, Chris. I write for the Geeky Waffle, and I usually write about animation. I will say, I can say this now because Arzu was originally writing the Bad Batch recaps, but I'm going to be taking over writing about the Bad Batch recaps when the show comes back. So I'm really excited about that. You can also, so Geeky Waffle, I've been on Bookmark and Busy. I've been on Space Waffles, which is our Star Wars show. I've been on Straight Out of Home Video, which is our Disney Straight to Home Movies podcast. We're about to record for Chip and Dale, the reboot, tomorrow, so that'll be coming out soon. So yeah, you can find me there. I moderate for Pink Milk on Friday nights, and I also write fan fiction over on AO3 under the name Chaos Lydia. I have a High Republic fan fiction called Fine Thread. I've done a lot of Rogue One micro fiction because I ship Cassian and Bodhi because they're sweet babies.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Cassian and K2SO, and I was like, that's an interesting take, but okay.
The entire movie is Cassian looking for Bodhi. Bodhi is the plot of the movie. Cassian, the only reason Cassian gets Jen is because he's looking for Bodhi. His entire movie is about finding Bodhi.
Hear me out, though.
Sniper pilot, baby.
What if Rogue One giant polycule?
Oh, I love that polycule family.
Yes.
I really do. I love that. Baze and Sherrod are the dads. Like, they're everybody's dads. I love it so much. So you can also find me at AO3, and I have a High Republic fic I'm very proud of. So,
well, thank you again for coming. I normally, whenever we have a guest on in the show, I try to do little gimmicks, especially the sign off. If they have a sign off, I will traditionally do the sign off from whatever show that they're on. However, I don't remember the full Two True Freaks thing. The only part I remember is Chris saying, if you have friends and go outside and talk to people, why not tell them about Two True Freaks?
I mean, I could very quickly explain what I think the Grand Inquisitor's penis looks like.
Okay, Bradley, let's go ahead and run the social.
That'd be really on brand for me.
Thank you for listening to Gold Squadron Gaze.
Did Charles fuck something up? email us and let us know at goldsquadrongaze@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at goldsquadgaze, and you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok at goldsquadrongaze. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Gold Squadron Gaze, where we post this podcast as well as exclusive video content.
Please join us next week and every week for another episode of Gold Squadron Games.
Okay, running socials. Bye.
No, it's like the ridges of a gas station pump.
Okay. And on that note,